My fellow bad guys, I, Lex Luthor, your leader, will speak now about my, Lex Luthor's plan. My villainous plan. Question the plan at your peril.
I think it's actually a social media problem more than, I don't think it's comic books. I think there's an issue with taking criticism. Or personally, there's also an issue with taking criticism too far.
Okay.
When you're criticizing somebody, you're making it personal. When you're criticizing the art, maybe you stop talking about the art, you start talking about personal things.
Sure.
And
That happens a lot.
I know when you weren't before you kind of transitioned out of comic books. Obviously, you're still doing comics to a degree now, but when that was like your full-time vocation, you were criticized. I've seen some of the things that people said. I believe it was about your Spider-Man art, where it was perhaps a little too exaggerated at the time.
Yeah. I wouldn't now, with the benefit of hindsight, I wouldn't disagree with them, but in the moment, right? I was criticized pretty hard stylistically, whether or not I was deserving to draw a Spider-Man book. I look back and tongue-in-cheekly say, no, I absolutely was not. Right. But in the time, I was like, this is freaking fun. I get to draw Spider-Man. I was enabled and empowered by my editors at the time to say, we know who you're tapping into. There's more of a McFarlane spin that you're putting on it. And McFarlane had since sort of graduated into like bigger and better things would Spawn and so on. At that point, everybody was sort of in that John Romita Jr. Tobey Maguire Spider-Man headspace. So when I came in and tried to do McFarlane, everybody had an allergic reaction to it, But to your point, social media wasn't as heavy-handed as it was, and now that it was back then. Message boards was all I had, and that's how I was getting blasted to be telling me that I was.
I've seen a few of the excerpts; they weren't very nice to you. I'll say that.
That's okay. I mean, I think to an extent, that's part and parcel of what comes with drawing a mainstream book, right? That I look at that as people who are really super into those characters, really invested in the book and the what's happening within the context of the time that they're reading it. So I understand where that's coming from, and I'm not going to say that I'm completely deserved of all that. Like there was a time when they crossed the line, I believe, right? But it's also I need to be the responsible one to not immediately lash back, right? I'm the person that's like, yeah, okay, I can let that bounce off of me because that's really, I'm done with that issue, right? And if I can somehow find a way to distill some of that criticism, where they were coming from, and understand like, oh, I get it. Like a perfect example of this is my friend Umberto Ramos, who was working on Spider-Man, and he got a ton of criticism being too cartoony and too like, but slowly and surely, Umberto, pivoted his style to be closer to what people were asking for, but not completely abandoning the DNA of how he felt about his art, right? He matured as an artist, and I'm glad that he was able to, at least he had enough sort of personal awareness and belief in his own body of work to go like, okay, I can see where they're coming from. I'm taking a lot of heat from doing this style way too much, pushing it way too far. But, he slowly started to cater it, but then he didn't lose himself, so it's still identifiable as his own. I respect that.
Yeah, so he heard the criticism. He said there's some validity to it. I can adjust certain things, but stay within, myself as an artist and present perhaps a more a Spider-Man the readers are more looking for.
Yep.
That
and
feels
so
like
there's a balance
thing
there
to do.
Yeah, but that takes a level of maturity, right? I don't know if social media has a tendency to highlight that maturity, but really put under focus immaturity.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to criticism.
That's the thing with social media.
Yeah.
If I go out there and I put a picture of your art today, I say this is cool.
Yeah.
At Eric Canete.
Yeah.
Some people they're gonna like it. They're like, yeah, that is cool.
Sure.
They're gonna share it around.
Sure.
Let's say I take a picture of your something and be like, Eric Canete is the biggest piece of crap artist ever. Can you believe this in all caps?
Right.
And I send that out.
Right.
That'll get a level of attention that dwarfs me saying that your art was good.
Right.
You get attention for being mean to people.
Yeah. I don't subscribe to it at all. Sometimes I can get pretty pointed. I can get like, I caught myself just as recently as the criticizing Marvel for not having the integrity to keep artists through, somebody had to check me and say, actually, those 2 artists that you're talking about, that was happening on a weekly basis, so they needed 2 artists. And I'm like, oh, I get that. I didn't understand context because I'm reading in trade paperback form. So I'm not immune from like being criticized, but to the clickbaity stuff that you're talking about, I don't know. I don't know why it's necessary to call somebody out that badly. I think it's, I don't know, what are you discovering by saying Eric Canete is the crappiest artist that I've ever seen? Can you believe it?
And then adding him with it, right?
Right.
So you have to see it.
I don't know. Maybe they just want validation from other people how crappy I am. I'm like, you win. Man,
I don't think that's what it is. I think people are addicted to their little timeline highlighting up, and that people liked it and retweeted it or replied to it. Yeah. I guess they've done studies. I guess it's like dopamine. People are like,
I bet. But you know, I said this when my Spider-Man, the one that you're referring to, was when that Spider-Man issue came out, right? My buddy who was at home I was away on a trip. I was in Rome and I was coming out of the tunnel, and we were about to see the Colosseum. Beautiful. I was sightseeing a bit, and I get a text from my friend. It's like, "Are you looking at these message boards? They're really trashing you right now." You know, and I said, like, are they? What are they saying? And he's listing off all the things about the awful way I drew Spider-Man. And we come out of the tunnel and I see, you know, the Colosseum for the first time, and I'm like, there's dum-dums getting angry at me for drawing Spider-Man incorrectly. I'm in Rome looking at the Colosseum. I think I won. You know, like you have to have. My point is, you've already won. Your stuff is already published. It's already out. You're already canon, right? Like you exist already in Spider-Man lore. Do you really need to be that thin-skinned to go into the mud pit with these guys and prove how you are, you know, irrelevant and you suck and whatever it is that they're throwing at you, dude? You've won already. You know, go about your day.
There's no winning once you get into it, into the muck. Maybe you'll have a good one-liner. And people are like, oh, you know, and you get all the memes where like people are dropping the mic or the guy's like doing this. Yeah. But eventually, if you keep with the mudsling, you're going to make yourself look like an idiot.
And at the end of the day, and I firmly believe in this, right? There's a lot of good people that fought for me to go and draw Spider-Man. I'll call them out in 2 in specific. One is Tom Brennan, who's an associate editor, and Steve Wacker, who was then the group editor for the Spider-Man books, right? Steve and Tom went to bat for me to get me on that title, right? They really did everything that they could to make sure that I was a good fit. When I went to go ask, hey man, do you have any work for me? And it happened to be that book. I had a long-standing relationship with both of those gentlemen when I was working on the Enter the Mandarin book, the Iron Man Enter the Mandarin book. So I had a good standing relationship with them. And if I were to go into the muck and start talking trash to people just because they were like, you know, pointing their fingers in my chest metaphorically, I represent those guys. And I would hate to misrepresent them in that capacity. Like, not only am I like drawing poorly now, which is completely subjective, but I'm also misrepresenting these guys who took a chance on me and said like, oh man, you know, Tom, you know, Steve, this guy's an asshole online, right? Why would you want to hire him? Why would you want to give him more work? You know, that's really poor character. And I don't ever want to get into that space where I would misrepresent them.
I know you're in more of a leadership role now. You know, obviously I was a master sergeant in the Air Force. And when you go to back somebody, you're accountable to what they do. I know exactly what you're talking about. When it's time to have the superintendent meeting. And you go in there like, Sergeant Doherty, is there a reason that you stumped for this guy to handle this project? Because he apparently screwed the pooch, and then he, you know, he was getting in arguments with this person from another organization. They made a complaint about him, and like, well, I guess that's my fault. I won't do that again.
No, 100%. And that is like, I don't know. I can only be accountable for myself, but the way I conduct myself is a direct reflection on the, you know, in your case, like the chain of command. You know what I mean? Like, I look at how I conduct myself as a reflection of the people that I have to answer to. And some people just don't think of it that way. They exist independent of that and uniquely as an entity in and of themselves. And there's truth to that. You obviously have to be your own brand. But I believe that there's instances in which I represent an IP, right? I have to be I have to be held accountable to that.
Yeah, it's I don't know. We're just in a weird place. I do think social media has had a net extreme negative on the way that people are interacting with each other.
Yeah.
They're willing to say a lot of things they would never say to your face. And
Yeah.
I do think their criticism goes too far, but
Yeah,
once
I do believe
you're the
there's-
professional,
I believe that there's a, what do you call it? There's a validity to that criticism, right? Where some of that criticism used to land was in letters pages in these comic books, right? Hey, I kind of like X, I don't like Y so much. So that criticism has always been in there. And now it's a little bit more, it's readily accessible.
yeah, the
And you
letter
really
page,
have-
you had to write the letter. You had to
Yeah.
find the address. You had to write it
For
on the envelope. You
For
had to
sure.
put it in there, put a
It's a bit
stamp
more
in it,
involved.
get it to the mailbox.
Right.
There's a little cooldown period instead of
Yeah,
just
yeah,
send.
but, yeah, no, that's true. That's true. I think it's also up to me to be able to filter out through all the noise, to not immediately knee jerk into the reaction. But Wes, I gotta be honest with you. Between you and me and your listener and your followers and your subscribers, there's plenty of times when I've started to type something out and go like, erase all that shit, man. That's not going to end well. And I don't know if there's too many creators out there who do get into the muck, who have that, is it self-confidence or self-awareness to back away from that space, because you immediately want to put the gloves on and start fighting, and this is really just not worth it, man.
I used to take screenshots of what I was about to send, and I would send it to a couple of people behind the scenes. Like, you think it's okay for me to say this? And if I send it to Doc's response was always, hell yeah, send that. But if I send it to Perch or a couple of other people, they'd be like, you could word that different.
Here's my thing, right? The moment I have to take a screen, in your case, like your process, your mechanism is, the moment I have to take a screenshot of something, I just know that's not going to be worth it.
I've had to do it like a year and a half. Because when you have a YouTube channel, obviously, I don't represent Marvel, and I'm
For sure.
it's a much smaller YouTube channel. But
For sure.
as soon as I put my opinions out there, I'm opening myself up to criticism.
For sure. Yeah.
And there are some
Yeah.
people that take my words and they want to spin them however they want, or they take them the wrong way, and they take things very personal, or I don't know, you get some weird stuff in your YouTube comments. It's easy to just in the moment be like, fuck that guy. Let's let him have it. And for the most part, it's like, I think I'm just going to ignore it this time. Or if they go too far, if I have a few rules, then
for sure.
it's like, okay, you're just not welcome here anymore.
For sure.
You've gone too far. You said, what about Eric Canete? Get out of here.
the what do you call it? Going back to our subject matter, and as far as art being incredibly subjective, right? You can like what you like, and sometimes when you don't like it to the point where you feel compelled to write something about it that's negative, yeah, I'm on board. You're well within your right to do that. Your filtering process, I think, is ideal, which is like the moment you start attacking on a super offensive. Now it's up to me to boot you,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've learned to brush it off. It's best to ignore it most of the time. You're like, well, at least they got emotional. At least I hit something. They got, they got upset with me. It's better than them watching the video and be like, didn't get anything out of that at all.
Whatever, I've moved on from that. Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. We are in a completely different. I love that term that you use, like the cool down period. I think there should be more of that. I laughingly told my friend, like, once you hit the tweet, right? I think there should be like 20 seconds in which you can cancel that shit. Where
like
you're
a countdown.
Yeah, like that little
19,
bar, that upload bar of like, this is 20 seconds worth. You really want to.
The last 5 seconds starts flashing.
Exactly. I think there should be that to the point where you're like, okay, cancel. There should be mechanisms put in place, especially for dum-dums out there who are just all about reactionary,
Yeah. So there was another criticism recently. I know you saw this. It was the J. Scott Campbell, obviously from Wildstorm Origins, one of the most in-demand comic book cover artists in the world. Yeah. The man can sell comic books just by his pinup covers.
Yeah, for sure.
And for some reason, people have been going after him for years. Mm-hmm. What they don't realize is it's not like J. Scott Campbell's like, Marvel, you have to hire me. Marvel goes to him and says, hey, we have this new Amazing Mary Jane comic. We would actually like to sell it.
That's correct.
We know if we put your art on the very first issue, or maybe on 2 or 3 of the covers, a lot of people will buy them, and it'll give the comic book a chance to succeed. Same thing with Gwen Stacy, any of that kind of stuff.
For sure.
People have been messing with him with his art. I guess he had enough. I know you saw this, where someone tried to fix his art.
Yeah.
And then he saw it, but the art, I don't know, the art fixed. There was things wrong with it. He said, you know what? I've had enough. He decided he was going to fix their art and gave him a professional level critique.
Yeah.
I thought it was apropos. I thought he did I don't know if it was the right thing, but I think he was perfectly within his rights to go back to that person and say, technically, the way that you've written or illustrated this person doesn't make sense. They'd fall off the couch. They got the Popeye arm. And, they just kind of throw it in their face.
That's pretty funny. I know I've had multiple conversations with Jeff in the past, but I can't say that I know him. But the fact that he went to the trouble of doing it makes me laugh, because I know in some artists' hearts, that's exactly what they've wanted to do, right? Here's the key. I think here's the critical thing that people keep talking about, and I hate that term. In this case, when they called him out for like, Jeff, you shouldn't punch down, right? That term to me in this case is not appropriate, or at least not a good enough argument for why he shouldn't have done it. And here's the reason why. When the artist who did his fix, the one that said, hey, I fixed J. Scott Campbell's art, when they, I don't know gender, but when they put that image out there, they said they fixed it and they made it better. Mm-hmm. That's the term that I glom onto. They made it better, which means to me, you said you are now ready for prime time. Right? You are now saying you are at, if not better than, the level of J. Scott Campbell. Because that's what you claimed. You literally said, hey, I can claim better. What you didn't expect, and I use this analogy with my friend, you're like, you just came out of your sparring session when you in the gym with your personal coach in boxing, right? And you said, whoa, I am now ready to go into the ring with Mike Tyson. That's what you proclaimed. I laughed jokingly, tongue-in-cheekly, I said that. And when you got into the ring with Mike Tyson and Mike destroyed you, you have people going like, oh, Mike, why did you punch him so hard? Why did you decimate him in the first 10 seconds of your fight? Well, this guy said he's ready for that. That's what you did. You proclaimed that the moment you said you did it better than J. Scott Campbell. And so when he stepped into the ring at you and decided to do it to you, that's not a punching down. That's a punching across. Right?
Yeah, you instigated it. It's not like J. Scott Campbell went to that person. It's like, hey, I would like you to fix my art. You went and said, hey, I did this better.
It's different. You in your terminology, that's what I'm going to hold you accountable to. You said you did it better, right? You are now ready to be in the same stage, the same ring as J. Scott Campbell. And when he like punches you into the mat, right? You had that coming, right? In whatever capacity. Now, if he had not done it better, right? If he had just said, hey, I took it past J. Scott Campbell's thing, and these are the couple of things that I thought could use some more realistic, real world, blah, blah, blah. Totally cool. That's dirt off my shoulder kind of rhetoric. But the moment you said you did it better, okay, you've opened yourself up to the same level of criticism that you put J. Scott Campbell through. That's not punching down anymore. I don't care what anybody says.
He came back flipping. Like, there were several screenshots of it. He had rundowns of everything that he would have fixed. And, it's like a master class in fixing that person's art. Like, these are the things like the anatomical incorrections or corrections that you need to put on here and all that stuff. So it wasn't just like I put a tweet out and hit send. Like, he thought about it. I liked that he had the moxie to finally stand up for himself, because people are just so rude to him about his art.
Yeah, I'm trying to also think, like, in the time that it took Jeff in the time that it took him to do that, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't just like a quick draw over. He did it part for part, piece by piece, deconstructing and explaining himself, right? I wonder how much income he had sort of put aside in order to be able to do that thing, because like, it's not even just Marvel coming to Campbell to get stuff on their covers. Different stores get variant covers of his art for a Marvel issue so that those people can leverage his commerciality, So Absolutely. It's like the time that it took him to do that. So that's the only time where I kind of like, Jeff, you could have drawn something and made so much more money for this thing that you decided to make a point on, but I'm not in his head. I don't control him. But although he did take that drawing around and, I think he donated the money that he made off of it to charity, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Went up there on eBay. So I think he took a negative, turned it into a positive, but he also let the naysayers say, if you want us to come in and fix my work, we're going to have words about it. If you're going to say that what you're doing is better. There's a difference between homage and fixing. Like you can take inspiration from someone else's work. Certainly, like the Todd McFarlane Spider-Man cover. How many times have we seen that thing?
Yeah.
A lot of people have gone and done homages to that, but once you say I did it better than Todd McFarlane, he might take exception.
I say this as, what do you call it, as gently and as respectable, as much respect as possible. Just don't be a dummy, when you're doing things like that, right? Like, I don't know what's motivating people to continuously do that to different artists. Just go do something else, right? Because it doesn't bring the kind of attention that you think it does, right? At least not respectable kind. Wasn't it? I can't remember how far back it was, where another professional from the editorial end, or excuse me, from the writing/editorial end, that claimed that thing was suspect, or at least was not ideal to do, right?
That was Dan Slott.
There you go. And it happened. And it
fix somebody's art. You better apologize.
Yeah, things like that. Just like there's so much inconsistency in that headspace. I guess it's just opinions being the nature of opinions being what they are. But it's like the moment J. Scott Campbell decides to strike back, suddenly people are up in arms about it. And you're like, okay, all right, but he's not incorrect.
Turnabout's fair play.
Absolutely. Especially with that rhetoric. I want to be clear about that, Wes. The way that artist went at J. Scott Campbell, you're like, oh, you think you're better. Okay, cool. This is fair game. We're now on the same level.
Yeah, so that's one way of responding to criticism. I thought it was appropriate,
It was funny. It was definitely entertaining.
Yeah, he could have, just turned the other cheek. But I imagine after years of sustained criticism, sometimes you just got to defend yourself. Yeah. So I thought J. Scott was within his rights. So we're winding down this conversation. One last thing I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
So you got started in Wildstorm. You transitioned. I think you've been working in animation, video games. Mm-hmm. You've come back to comic books. You're working on Arc Athena. You've been putting out the images. You've been doing a lot of YouTube videos and things like that. So you're returning to the industry. I don't know. Did you ever leave it full time? Or are you still reading comic books? I'm not really sure about that, but what do you think about the current state of the industry? Is this an exciting time to get back into it? How exciting is crowdfunding for you?
For me, from the mainstream standpoint, it's a confusing one, which I think is natural because I'm so behind on what's good or what at least are in my tastes. So it's confusing. Sometimes I don't know when things are. I can't keep track of like issue numbers anymore because everything has been restarted so many times. It was easy to understand like, oh, I have 3 issues to pick up before this and 3 issues to pick up after this. In the most recent like relaunching craze, I don't know where this falls into what year and in what particular timeline. So that's completely thrown out the window. I literally have to ask people, when did this happen? What year was this number 1 in? In what context was this number 1 in? Was it before this number 1 or after this number 1? And that to me is like a barrier to entry for people who are trying to get into comic books. That's a hugely problematic when you don't know when anything is happening, right? And in what context. Some people might see that as like a jumping on point, but to me it's like I'm confused as to why this mattered now and why this doesn't matter as much then, right?
Because jumping off point. If you enjoyed what was happening in the story and they're rebooting it, right? Well, what if I don't like the new direction?
Right. Anyway, that to me is like one of the most confusing parts. The exciting part is that as a creator, you're no longer beholden to the previously existing model, which is, I have this book, I may want to work in mainstream, I may want to go into, image and pitch it, and who knows what their curation process is like now. You can do it on your own, right? It's a lot of extra work, right? It's a lot of extra sort of the things that you don't think about when you're going into crowdfunding and creator-owned space that's not Image Comics related, is that like, you have to do all the hype yourself. There's no infrastructure built in to accommodate you immediately. You actually have to institute it, implement it yourself, right?
Yeah, you go find your audience, let them know that you're there and why they need to come and look at your product.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't get to have, and even people who have the opportunity to work on a Batman, then move into, I'm using Batman in general, but like the people who have the opportunity to work on Batman and then go and do their creator-owned work, the popularity of that is not built into your creator-owned stuff. Batman sells because it's Batman, right? Mm-hmm. So the point I was trying to make was that, now that I'm in this like creator-owned crowdfunding space, I have to actively engage in finding that audience, or at the very least, making that audience aware that I'm doing this kind of stuff again. So that to me is the most exciting part, because I'm up to the challenge, and every new thing that I uncover, we were talking offline about talking to Tim, and like the stuff that the information that he gives over to me, the moment I learn, my brain gets a spark. I'm like, oh, that's so freaking awesome. I want to learn more about that and how to leverage that and make sure I'm doing that correctly, going off that, successful playbook that he's helped to establish. That's awesome.
It's crazy if you think about crowdfunding. Obviously, Brian Polito has been crowdfunding for quite some time and been very successful.
Yeah.
But crowdfunding, as far as comic books, has really picked up steam, and the expectations of the marketplace, people that are looking for cool crowdfunded comic books, from 3 years ago, as opposed to what the expectation is, the product, the delivery mechanisms, and everything that you're going to get today, is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to keep up with what people are doing as far as their packaging, delivery. How are you going out and gaining your audience? How are you interacting? What are you going to offer to them to make your campaign stand out? People have very high expectations now because there have been so many really cool books delivered lately.
Absolutely. One of the things that I'd come to identify, especially the moment I said, hey, I'm going to go into this crowdfunding space, I wanted to dive deep into what wasn't being delivered, because it's easy enough to get caught up in all the, I call it like the icing on top, right? Like the trading cards, the extra bonuses, the tiered stuff that keeps happening. But I was trying to get to the core of like what isn't being serviced. And one of the things that I'd realized, just based on just light research, not really heavy duty, but the moment I started looking at the number, it was astounding to think that from end of campaign to actual delivery to the backer's hands was somewhere around 6 to 8 months. And but that's a bit unfair, because there's books that have been, like embarrassingly late, but that's the average, right? Mm-hmm. But that's like, how do you keep people from staying excited? And like, how do you keep people excited about your project when in 6 to 8 months things change so dramatically? You could just as easily go down the memory hole as far as that delivery. So that's been my primary checkbox that I wanted to fulfill, which is like shortening that, like really narrowing that delta from end of campaign into backers' hands. And I'm really attempting to get it into their hands in no more than 8 weeks. Yeah, it's
crazy. We were talking behind the scenes, and you've shared some of the art. You were telling me how much you had done. I was like, wow. I was like, you have.
And that's the other thing. That's the preventative.
2 years worth of campaigns already done.
Yeah, that's a preventative, and I've identified why that was a problem. Why that delivery time was so wide is because from start of campaign, some people might only have 8 pages done. So I took it upon myself to say, like, well, screw that. If that's going to help me get these issues into backers' hands in a shorter amount of time, let me do all the pages now and then start the campaign. And I have the opportunity to do that.
Well, it's great. Obviously, you have your career. You're successful, so you can take a risk on yourself that you're going to be able to produce all this art that you're going to get to pay later on.
Yeah, some people don't
I think
have
a lot
advantage.
of the problem is, you have a writer, artist team. Maybe they don't have the funds already. You got to pay the artist.
Correct.
And if you got to get the money to finish the project, you got to do the crowdfunding campaign to kind of fund it up front. So you're in the advantageous position, being the artist yourself, that you can take a risk on yourself. You have another career. You don't need the money right now. That in the long run, on the back end, you're going to get it and then some by not only providing a good product, we've seen the art, but you're going to be providing it, on time and in rapid succession.
Correct. And the other component, and I think I've spoken to you about this before, Wes, is that I'm just not doing the 164, 72 page graphic novel that in a way you can sort of kind of game the system in as far as crowdfunding is concerned, right? Like, I'm doing 5 issues back to back to back to back. And one of the key things that I believe I still need to establish is that trust factor from the general audience, from the potential backer, right? Which is like, can this guy deliver 5 issues, right? I've waited 8 months to get 1 issue from one guy.
When you say issues, people are going to think you're saying 20 pages. Your volumes are going to be like 50 plus pages, correct? 64 in total. Right. So it's like, how is this guy going to be able to deliver on that? And the answer is, hopefully,
because I'm doing, I believe I can because I'm doing all of these pages way ahead of time, right? So establishing that, customer backer trust is a big one for me.
Well, and you're going to have the time to actually go out there and promote your product and try and get the awareness out there. Because if you were doing the pages as you were doing the crowdfunding campaign, you would never sleep. You wouldn't have time for a career.
Right.
You'd be grinding on the pages and then trying to let people know that the campaign was live.
Correct. I gave myself a pretty decent runway and obviously tried to really adhere to a schedule that was sustainable without throwing the work-life balance out the window,
Yeah. It's crazy stuff. It's,
it's so much fun though, man. It's so much fun. This step back when I was trying to break into comics, like this wasn't available. Can you imagine, like late 90s going up to people and saying, hey, can you give me $25 so I can do this book and maybe I'll deliver it to you 8 months from now? There was no mechanism in place to allow that to happen. And now, I'm like, oh, this is available to me, right? And there's people who actually believe in my body of work enough that they're willing to take a chance on me. I'm on board for that, man. This is awesome, an exciting time to those people who have sort of the quote unquote muscle to do it, Yeah,
it's crazy. You don't have to know an editor to get you in.
Yeah.
You have to have a good product. You have to be able to deliver it, but you also have to go and find the audience. It's all on you, but there's no one that can stop you now.
And that's what I mean. Some people don't have the muscle for that, right? Some people don't have the tenacity. And I don't begrudge those people. I think if you know exactly what you want and that system that's in place is something that you can leverage, you're happy within that system, totally awesome. For me, I'm like, I'm going to go try this other thing.
Well, Eric, we've been going on for over an hour now. I really appreciate the time. A couple of these are going to be on YouTube. The whole thing will be unedited on the podcast. Really enjoy this conversation. Is there anything else that you wanted to say just to wrap things up? Or
no, that's it. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I love going back in a time capsule, a time machine, and thinking about my time in Wildstorm. If I can, I hope that he ends up. I'm gonna send him this the link to this when it goes live. I'm gonna send it to Jim and the rest of the team and be like, hey, I talk about us. So I hope they listen.
Terrific. Hopefully he watches it. Jim has an amazing YouTube channel. You ever see him draw Wonder Woman like with his eyes closed?
Yeah. I think that's just a guy who has become supremely comfortable in the kind of stuff that he's capable of. So he was awesome then. He's awesome now. My respect to him.
Later, Eric.
See you, man.